again to Profiles on Nantucket Community Television, Channel 8. I'm Charlie Walters. In January of 2024, Jody Kasper became the new Chief of Police on Nantucket. She comes from Northampton, Massachusetts, where she was on their police force for 25 years, including 8 years as their chief. Jody, thank you.
It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Why did you decide to go into law enforcement, and when did that happen?
Well, I am not one of those police officers that has wanted to be a police officer since I was very young. I hear that a lot, that people, when they were kids, they always wanted to be a police officer. That was not my experience. I really didn't know what I wanted to be. And then when I was in high school, it was time to make decisions about going to college and what I wanted to study. And it was actually my guidance counselor that steered me toward criminal justice. And then as soon as I started studying criminal justice in college, I knew that policing would be a great fit. So that's really how I got into it. I didn't have any role models or dreams as a kid. I didn't have any of those things that many people report. I just had a fantastic guidance counselor.
And how did you happen to end up in Northampton?
So I always wanted to work in Northampton. I grew up in Shelburne Falls in western Massachusetts, a much smaller community than Northampton. And Northampton is somewhere where I enjoyed being. I liked going out to dinner there. There was always concerts and events, and I just really liked the community. So I really wanted to serve that community because I so enjoyed being there. So that's how I ended up there.
Well, it's a great part of New England and Massachusetts. I've got family out there, so I spent time there. You've left a very attractive place for another attractive place, but why Nantucket?
So I was ready for a change, and I think I've shared this with many people, but my wife is actually from Yarmouth. And so she went to UMass Amherst and then kind of got stuck out there with me, right? And so she stayed out there for many, many years. And we were both ready for a change and wanted to move back to this area. For Melissa, she feels like she's kind of coming home again. You know, she has ties to this area that are strong. And it's an area where I spent a lot of time on the Cape. I had not been out to Nantucket, but I really love this part of the state. So when I saw the job opening for Nantucket, not one that comes up very often, right? Chief Pittman had been here for 19 years, so it's not a job that opens very much. I was really excited to see it. For me, Nantucket, everything that I learned about it in my research when I was considering whether or not to apply for the job just was like such a good fit for me when I was looking at it. I love the commitment to the outdoors. I love all the preserved open space. I love the bike trails, the walkability. And I actually really love the history of the island as well. I enjoyed learning about it. And I liked the idea of being on an island with a year-round residence, you know, as well as serving the summer visitors. But the community as a whole was very attractive to me. And that's how I landed out here.
When you applied for the job, had you spent time on the island at all?
So prior to applying, yes, but not before the job was announced. I had never been to Nantucket, but when it was announced, Melissa and I came out to the island to start to learn about it, to see if we thought it would be a good fit. And we, on our boat ride back, we were like, yes, that's a wonderful fit, and we were really excited about it. So then we came back more times after that to continue to explore.
Trace your career in Northampton. What did you do when you started with the department there?
So I started in Northampton as a patrol officer. That's how almost everyone enters the field of policing. So it was 1998. I had been a campus police officer for a couple of years at Mount Holyoke College in South Hadley, and then had the job opportunity in Northampton. So I joined as a patrol officer, and I loved it. I did time on the midnight shift and then joined the bike patrol unit for a couple of years. So I was always in the downtown area in Northampton as a bike officer, and then was fortunate enough to have an opportunity to join the Detective Bureau. So for 6 or 7 years, I worked as an investigator in the Detective Bureau, which Northampton's a busy place, so I covered a lot of different types of cases there, and then was promoted to patrol sergeant and patrol lieutenant, detective lieutenant, captain of operations, and then chief in 2015. So I was very lucky to have opportunities to do a lot of different things within the department.
Now, is that a typical career path in a police department?
Yes, yes, very much so. If you have an interest in all those different things, then yes, it's a typical career path. I mean, some people choose, they don't want to work in administration and policing. They want to work kind of boots on the ground and be doing more of that work. So it's a typical career if you want to seek joining the administration of a police department. But of course, many people retire out as officers or sergeants or detectives.
What were some of the challenges that you had as chief in Northampton? What were your biggest challenges?
Northampton definitely had a lot of challenges, especially over the last few years. Some people may or may not know, our department was defunded in 2020 after George Floyd was killed.
When you say defunded, exactly what do you mean by that?
Our budget was intentionally cut by city council because we were the police department and they wanted to make a budget cut to our department. And that is how it was voted. So we had a 10% budget cut in 2020, which was, the voting is usually done in May or June, right around then. And it was right after the George Floyd incident. So it was very difficult. There was a lot of protesting, right after George Floyd and then leading up to the budget. So thousands of people surrounding our police building, in our streets, everywhere else. Northampton's a community that has always had a lot of social engagement. And this definitely resulted in a lot of social engagement from community members. So that was really difficult to lead through. It was very difficult for our officers who felt not valued by their community and also just had job instability. They didn't know if they would be able to keep their jobs, and we actually had to lay off people as a result of the cutting. And then no one knew the next fiscal year, is that going to happen again? So it was very hard for us to attract new people to hire because we didn't know how stable their jobs would be, and also to retain our existing staff. That was very challenging because they felt like, well, more cuts may come. So we lost a lot of people, not just in the initial as a result of defunding, but over the year or so afterward where people decided they wanted to serve other communities. That's very hard to have officers who, we had comprised the Northampton Police Department, and they went off to join. They didn't leave policing. They left, our city. That was very hard to manage through.
How big is the Northampton Police Department?
It was originally, prior to being defunded, we had 65 full-time sworn police officers, and then we lost 4 positions, so we were down to 61 after the defunding. And then actually, we had gotten some positions back, so we kind of had moved back up just before I left.
What happened the second year? Was funding restored? Was it cut more?
Funding was not restored the next year. We remained where we were. But then just the year, I'm trying to think, it was like just before I had left, we had gotten 3 additional full-time positions that were student officers. So basically we could hire people and send them to the academy so that when we had vacancies, we had positions that we could fill. It's complicated, but we got a couple of positions back.
Now, in some respects, Northampton and Nantucket are, in a way, they're mirror images, because Nantucket, the big season is the summer, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Northampton area, I would think the summer would be relatively slow because school is not in session. Or does summer session make up for that?
Well, Northampton's just kind of always busy, honestly. It's, if you've been there, a lot of restaurants, a lot of event venues, a lot of concerts, and just there's a lot going on in the city all the time. That's what it always felt like. We did see an increase in people, of course, in the academic year with students coming in. Northampton was in the middle of the 5 college area. So yes, we had a lot of students, parents' weekends, things going on the campuses. But summertime was pretty busy. We had a lot of parades and fairs and just a lot going on. So it felt like the pace was relatively consistent throughout the year with our activity based on what was going on.
I wrote down some statistics about that area, and the city of Northampton is 36 square miles. That's about 2/3 the size of Nantucket. Of course, it's not an island, so you're surrounded by other municipalities.
Mm-hmm.
But the population is only about 30,000, which is smaller than I thought it would be.
Mm-hmm.
But if you add in the Smith students, and next door you've got Amherst and UMass Amherst and Mount Holyoke and Hampshire, that's an awful lot of people that are going to be traveling through your city.
It was a lot of people. Yeah, we were the county seat. So we had, the hospital and the courthouses and the RMV and just all the things, So everybody by day really came into the community to go to work. And then, of course, there were many restaurants and bars and activities at night. So a different population would come in the nighttime. So it just always felt like it was busy place.
Now, I know you haven't been here for a summer yet, but I'm wondering if the difference between Nantucket's winter and summer population is similar at all to Northampton's?
I don't know.
I mean, if you plop me down in the middle of the street, on Main Street in Northampton, in August, would I know that it was August and not December or March? Just based on the number of people walking around.
You would know. Yeah. Downtown Northampton really opens up in the summertime. A lot of outdoor dining, a lot of events. It's just a lot busier, I guess, in the downtown area during that time. So you would definitely know the difference. You'd be sitting downtown and there'd be people out shopping and eating and parades and bands and music, and you'd be seeing a lot of things outside in the summertime.
So that, I guess, makes up for the fact that all the students, or most of the students, have gone on a summer break.
Yeah, Smith College actually has a pretty robust summertime program. So even though a lot of their regular kind of undergrad students have gone home, their social work program was there in the summertime, as well as other students on campus. So we still had, Smith still positively impacted the downtown area and our population in the summertime as well.
So you weren't laying off officers in the summertime?
No, we didn't have the dramatic increase or decrease in call volume by season. I mean, yes, a little bit more in the summertime calls would tick up just because more people are outside and there's kind of more going on. But we had a lot in the winter too. So I would say it was pretty consistent throughout the seasons.
Let's switch over to Nantucket.
Yes.
I know you've only been on the job for 2 months, but what do you think your biggest challenge is?
Housing and staffing. And anywhere, I don't know police chiefs in the Commonwealth who are not struggling with staffing issues. That's just a reality of this career field. Certainly over the last 5 or so years, even before 2020, interest in public sector work seemed to be waning. We had less interest. Many of us who are senior officers would always say, I remember, when I applied, there were 800 people there for 2 positions. And it was like that. It was extremely competitive. I remember taking exams to be hired, and there were thousands of people lined up for the state exam, the way they used to offer it around the state. There'd be a couple of testing sites, and you'd be in lines, thousands of people. And now that's just not the case anymore. Now, we see numbers drop half as many, even less than half that we used to have. So now trying to recruit candidates into policing is much more proactive. You have to really go out and find people and kind of say to them, we really want you to be here. You have to be more, you have to offer a good salary and benefits package. You have to offer a good place to live. You have to offer a good workplace where people enjoy working, have good camaraderie. You have to offer a lot, because right now, when I came on the job, it was very hard to find police work, to find a job. It was very competitive. It took me a couple of years. I was a campus officer before I was a municipal officer. Nowadays, if an officer wants to work almost anywhere in the Commonwealth, they could probably go there and get a job. And it's just not the way that it was. So we are competing with each other as police departments. So that is just true across the state. And definitely we feel that here with the added layer of our housing challenge.
Is this just a Massachusetts phenomenon or a regional phenomenon, or is this true all over the country?
It's true all over the country.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So many less people are interested in police work. But I think you'll find that, police work is one, but I think you would find that in other public sector jobs as well. It's just people are going into private work more. And so teaching, firefighters, DPW jobs, there's always vacancies in almost all those professions in municipalities that I'm familiar with.
What about private security firms? Are they, that's sort of a parallel road to what you're doing, but are they having the same problems getting people?
I couldn't really speak to that. I actually don't know how private security is doing. I don't know.
So I've heard there are more private security people more private security people than there are people in law enforcement.
That may be the case.
Nationwide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that may be the case.
Well, if someone wants to become a police officer in Massachusetts, since that's where we are, what you talked about some of these a minute ago, but what do you have to do to go from the desire to be a police officer to being one?
So you have to apply for a job with the place that you want to work. And I would really encourage someone that might be interested to really consider those two things, right? The community you're moving to and the police department you're going to be working in. Just because you're wearing a uniform like this does not mean you're going to have the same experience in every community. Police departments really operate very differently depending on different communities. So you want to find a place where you'll be a good fit and where you want to serve that community, and you want to find a place where you will enjoy living. Right? This is our lives. We have long careers and we want to be somewhere that we love. So those things are very important. And without a doubt, it was part of my, decision to come out here to Nantucket. This was a place where I really wanted to live as well. It's not always all about, for officers looking at jobs, it's not always all about what comes first or I don't even know, the money or, this other thing. It's a really big decision to make to join a department and join a workforce. And what I have found here in Nantucket with the Nantucket Police Department is it's an incredible department with really impressive officers who are incredibly hardworking, really dedicated to the community. One of the things that I think makes this place special for officers is that they are all a part of the community, right? We have many officers who have other jobs and other volunteer activities in the community. They're coaches, they're, volunteering at different entities around the island. So that is different. You don't find that everywhere. And I think it makes it a really special place where our officers are just incredibly connected to the community that they're serving. One of the things that I love about being here.
Do any of your officers commute?
The longest commute might be from down Milestone Road across the island, which I know is a long commute for many, right?
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because you go down to the 7:30 boat.
Yeah, we don't.
And there are hundreds of contractors, tradespeople coming off the boat.
Right. We don't have that. And, certainly something that has been contemplated in order to help our workforce, because we need people. We need people to come and want to be here. But the challenge is, as you can imagine, that we rely on we don't have mutual aid. So if all of a sudden some big thing happens, when I worked in Northampton, we had big things happen, we need help, and people would come in from surrounding communities. We just don't have that here. We have the state police on island, but they also have a small staff. So we're on our own. And so if our officers are living off island and we have a major event, that we don't have them here. So that is one of the things that I consider as I think about, whether or not we would be open to having officers living off island. We need our folks here to take care of our community. So it's an additional challenge.
Well, if there were a major event, what would you do?
Well, we're all here. So we certainly have mutual aid capabilities. It's just they're not as fast as they might be if we were not on island, right? So we can call for help from the state police or other regional entities, but it would just take them longer to get here. Oh. Depends on the type of incident that you have. Some incidents you really need a rapid response, depending on what it is, where you need a lot of help quickly. We're lucky to have all of our staff here on the island, but other conditions may be multiple day events, depending on what it is, and those entities would arrive very, a couple of hours. They would be here and able to provide support. And, if we know of events ahead of time, like you've probably seen, like for the Boston Pops, we can put in a request ahead of time and have additional resources out here to help. So when we know things are happening, we can call on those additional resources. But if they're unexpected, that is why it's so important to have us all here.
Well, in the case of Boston Pops, you're talking about bringing people over.
Yes.
From wherever.
Yes. You may have seen, I think they had pictures of the state police, Mass State Police came over and did a great job assisting at the last Boston Pop. So that's just an example.
Let's get back to what one does to be a police officer. Mm-hmm. Testing, that sort of thing. Yes. Talk about that.
Yes. So to become a police officer, you apply online. It's a short application. You interview. We don't have a written test here. Some organizations do have that. So
in Massachusetts.
In Massachusetts, there used to be a civil service exam. I was talking about standing in those long lines. Yeah. I had to take a civil service written test, civil service exam, in order to be a police officer. Many departments don't have that anymore. Honestly, it's, in my experience, like we got rid of it in Northampton in 2005. It's an additional hurdle that can kind of limit who it is that you're able to hire. The thing that's frustrating about being a civil service community, if you're relying on that test, is the test occurs, you get a list of candidates. The next day, someone knocks on your door and says, hey, I'd like to be a police officer here. They're great. They would be a great fit, whatever else. You look on your list, they didn't take the test. So you say, I'm so sorry, but you didn't take the test. So you'll have to take the test the next time around in a year, in 2 years, and then we'll look at you then. Because it's only offered, it used to be offered every 2-ish years.
Really? That seems like a very long time to take a test.
But what it was there were so many people that were interested that you would never exhaust your list because you'd offer it, you'd go down it, and it would last you a very long time. And now communities are exhausting their list. They literally have no other candidates to hire, and they can't hire someone who comes in looking for a job. That's not the case here. The case here is you can come in, apply, be interviewed, and then, if you pass the interview, you go through a background investigation, which takes 3 or 4 weeks.
Pass the interview.
Yes, you are interviewed. People recommend you.
Okay.
Yep.
You can fail an interview.
Well, you cannot be selected. I guess I shouldn't use the word pass. It's probably not pass-fail, but you can be selected to move forward. You're interviewed by a panel, and they say, yes, you'd be a good fit to work here, or you wouldn't be.
And the next step is this online test?
Nope, there's no online testing. We don't do any tests here.
You don't do any testing at all?
Nope. That's not a written exam. So you do the interview, and then you do background investigation, which is pretty extensive. Look into your history. You have to take a psychological exam. You have to take a physical fitness test. And then you have to take we would offer you a physical fitness test, and then you have to take a test right before the academy to get in. You have to meet particular minimum standards.
So what time frame are we talking about from application to academy?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this is one of the challenges of hiring a police officer. If I have a vacancy right now today, that part of the process that I just talked about can take about 4 months, a little more, a little less, but right around 4 months. So then what we have to do is after you've done all those things, I have to wait for a police academy to start. And when will it start next, right? So there's different police academies across the state. The one we typically use here is in Plymouth. So we currently have a class in Plymouth. We have 3 student officers who are in the Plymouth Academy now. So they won't have a new class for a while. This group has to spend, their time there. There are many months there and then graduate. So there's another one out in Western Mass that starts in May. There's one in Randolph that starts in June or July. So we kind of have to wait until we find one where we can get them in and get them through it. That's about 5 to 6 months. And then they graduate from the academy. Then they finally put a uniform on and join the Nantucket Police Department and ride with a field training officer for 4 months before they're ready. So if I had a vacancy today, which is March of 24, you wouldn't see that police officer driving on their own around fulfilling a full-time job and serving on their own until about June of 25.
That's a long time.
It's a long time. That's why it's so hard when we have vacancies that we don't anticipate, because it's one thing if someone says, I'm going to retire in a year, we can plan for that. But if someone just says, here's my 2 weeks notice, it leaves a vacancy on the department for a very long time. Mm-hmm.
Who pays for the academy?
We do.
In this case, the town of Nantucket.
Yes.
But it comes out of the police department budget, presumably?
Yes. Yep.
Now, living on Nantucket, you can't commute to Plymouth very easily.
Nope.
If somebody wanted to live temporarily in Plymouth or Randolph, whatever, who pays for that?
The town.
The town pays for that as well.
Yep. We have to, because what else are you going to do? We don't have a police academy here, so we would love if they had a house or a place to stay or family, but there's a reality to that if we're going to send 3 people who, we hope the people we hire are from Nantucket, right? Well, that's where we want them to be from, and if they're from here, they're going to have to stay there. You have to arrive at the academy at various academies or different times, but anywhere, 7 a.m., you have to get there ready to work out and do your physical fitness, and then have a full academic day. You may not get out until 4 or 5 o'clock. So we can't expect them to be taking the boat.
I'm interested in the psychological testing. What sorts of, can you describe that a bit?
Well, different. So we hire outside. There are particular people that offer this kind of pre-employment psychological testing. Different psychologists use different methods. So the MMPI, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, is kind of one of the classic psychological exams that they may give. When I had to do mine was many years ago, I had to do the MMPI. I had to do an IQ test where I was like lining up cubes in a mirror and just had to do an IQ test. I had to do another acronymed test, the IPI. So it's a little bit different for everyone, but ultimately we will receive a little overview of the candidate and kind of how they did, what their strengths are, and where they might have some challenges, and then whether or not they're recommended for policing.
Well, it sounds though there's not a standardized state test.
There's not a standardized state test, no.
So every municipality has its own.
Some use the same, right?
Okay.
So some would use the same testers. I mean, these are consultants that we hire. We certainly don't have anyone in-house that does that kind of testing.
And who makes a final decision on hiring? The chief?
Yes. Yep.
Not the select board or the city council or whatever. It's the chief who makes that decision.
Well, there has to be a position that's open, right? So I have a budget and I have a number of positions and I can't overhire, so I have to be working within my budget when I'm hiring. But as long as I have a good candidate, we can hire that person and get them into the academy and hopefully get them on the job.
I want to talk about the budget. Is that something you are solely responsible for? Do you have to put that together yourself as chief?
Well, it's under my responsibility, but I have a fantastic deputy who has been working with the budget for many, many years. So that is an area where I feel lucky. When I came in, the FY25 budget, FY24 budget, FY26 budget, I have to think about where we are, right?
Well, as we're speaking, we're at the end of coming to the end of FY24.
Yes, that's right, because it's March. So the FY25 budget was already put together, prior to me coming in, which is great because building a budget and knowing everything about it takes many months to do. That's a process that normally I would have started in September, sit down, go through the entire budget. You have to incorporate contractually agreed upon pay raises, any stipends, anything you anticipate changes with fuel prices, if you're going to have maintenance contracts increase, whatever it may be, you have to build that budget. And then if you have significant capital projects, big buildings that we're doing or anything like that, you also have to, it's separate, but you have to, complete everything for that and then ultimately, present it and have it approved. I felt very lucky when I came in because this is a different budget for me here that I'm used to working with, that the deputy had put that together and it had already been kind of moving along. So I'll have a lot to learn about that as I move through the next year and help, work with the deputy to prepare the next one.
Given Nantucket's huge population fluctuation in the summertime, I'm wondering, is the Northampton budget bigger than the Nantucket budget?
It's it's smaller.
Northampton's is smaller?
Northampton's is smaller. I will say this though, the dispatch center, the communications center, did not fall under the Northampton police budget. It was a separate department. So we have 11 people in our dispatch communications center here. So that does make up for some of that difference. All those salaries and costs and everything like that, I didn't have to pay for out of my Northampton budget.
Well, this doesn't surprise me, even though Northampton is, 50% larger than Nantucket. It doesn't have 75, 80, 100,000 people in the summertime.
That is true.
Nobody really knows how big it is in the summer, as you've probably discovered.
I've heard lots of guesses.
Yeah, me too, and I ignore most of them. But for what it's worth, my partly educated guess is about 75 or 80 at the peak, which is probably 4th of July weekend, I believe. I could be totally wrong on that. And maybe I'll ask you again after the summer's over and see what you think.
Yep, that sounds good. I don't know. I've heard many numbers.
Now, we talked about housing, obviously. What other challenges do you see as chief of Nantucket's police?
So just like any police department, dealing with the same challenges is how do you deal with complex social issues that have taken years to grow and develop in a person, and how do you provide them with the best services as a community? So examples are people who are in crisis, mental health. That's huge. So in Northampton, we had been working on, we had just gotten some co-responders, crisis co-responders that were nested in our building that went out on calls with us whenever we had a call that had a mental health component. So many communities are dealing with that challenge, and Nantucket is as well. I was very pleased to come into Nantucket and find such a strong collaborative relationship with Fairwinds. We have monthly meetings. We sit down and talk about things to try to figure out how to best serve people who are in crisis. But there are the resource challenges are real here. When we had someone in crisis in my former community, we could get them somewhere. We could drive them out of town to wherever they needed to go to get them services. And we have some real limitations here. So how do we best serve people who are really struggling right now and need help? And who's best to serve them? And what can we do for them? So that's a big challenge, as well as other, similar type major challenges, whether it's houselessness or domestic violence. All those things exist, substance use. And those solutions come from the community together. It must be collaborative, because the police we're not designed for that. We don't have all the resources available in order to always help someone. We need to partner up with other people so we can best handle those and get people on the best path as a result of that call. So,
well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because this has been an issue all over the country. Police officers do a lot, but they're not mental health professionals. For all the other things they're not mental health professionals.
Yeah.
Now, in Northampton, when you would have a mental health professional go with the police to wherever it happened to be, those people aren't part of the police department, are they? They're working with?
We had a contract with an outside crisis provider. So they were in our building. They weren't our employees, right? But they were working under a Department of Mental Health grant. So they were nested with us. They were in our car with us sometimes and would go on calls with us, but not our direct employees.
Well, when that happened out there, who was paying for them?
The grant, the Department of Mental Health grant.
Which was not through the police department, or was it?
We had applied for the grant. The police department applied for the grant.
Came from them to the police department?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. If you could wave a magic wand down here, what would you do about these circumstances?
Which one? Mental health?
Mental health, yeah.
I mean, if I could wave a magic wand anywhere, it would be the same thing for all these, is to have a place and a solid resource to bring people that is reliable and staffed. But that's the case everywhere. That was the challenge we had. We have hospital emergency departments that have ended up over the last few years being where people get brought for some of these issues, but it's just they're not best. It's not the best place for someone who is really in a mental health crisis. They need a different type of place. So if I could build my own world, I would give every community a place like an emergency department that was designed for people in mental health crisis, where we could bring people and they could find what they needed. And it's very hard to find that. And we are limited. Our officers here are exceptional in the way that they speak with people, their de-escalation skills, and they do a great job connecting with members of the community. They know everybody. It's not, people sometimes make the assumption that like officers go deal with someone as if we don't know who they are. And of course, all of our officers know who everybody is because we work with people on the same calls, right? We get called to the same home many, many times. People have grown up here together. Everyone knows. So you want to provide the best help. And how do you do that? And so we work with Fairwinds, and that is a great link to have someone there where you may go on a call that comes in as a police call, and they both go, and the officer can kind of assess the call and say, you know what, this is really more of a mental health call. The officer can step back a little bit and kind of turn the call over to a crisis clinician who can get the call going on a different path than it might have gone. So, and it's hard to know what a mental health call is. I mean, sometimes, yes, you're going to get a call for a well-being check, and someone's going to say, I'm really worried my family member is in crisis. They are in crisis. They're struggling, right? But we may get a domestic call. We may get a noise complaint. We may get a suspicious person. Any of those can turn out to be a mental health call where someone is in crisis and doing whatever they're doing that's causing the police to be called. So it's important to think of responders going out on any type of calls that might have a mental health component.
And I assume you're not going to necessarily know about that until the officers are on the scene and can assess what's happening?
So our dispatchers are pretty great here. And also we do sometimes know if it's a call we've already been on or a house we've already been to, our dispatchers are able to look at their call history at the location and see, oh, wait a minute, this is a type of, residence that we've been to where we know this person involved and they're actually more likely that they're dealing with mental health issues. So we may know that ahead of time. But you're right, if it's someone new, we would not know that until they got there. But they can call from the scene and say, can you reach out to Fair Winds and see if they can come and assist.
Well, a moment ago, you mentioned that it's a small town, which of course it is, but it's also a small town that's an island, which I would think would work in your favor in some ways because it's easier for everybody to know everybody else because we're all on the same piece of sand all the time. On the other hand, as you've referred to before, if you have to take somebody off island, that's a whole new set of hurdles. And if you have a storm or if you have fog, that's even more hurdles. So it works. Being a small, contained community is both good and bad for what you're doing.
Absolutely. Yes, I couldn't agree more. I have definitely heard stories of, okay, we found this person in bed off island. We found them the services that they need. They're in Hyannis or they're in wherever. And now we have to get them there. And we have a storm or we need staffing, right? Sometimes they need to have someone with them. It depends on the situation. Or they don't want to go because they have family here that they don't want to leave, or the island is a challenge. It's a hurdle to be that far away from family sometimes. There's a lot of things that can come up. But without a doubt, yes, that's very hard. It's not as easy as just driving someone to the town over and bringing them to the resource they need.
Who gets the person from Nantucket to whatever facility they're going to? Is that the police department?
Nope. So if it's a mental health issue, it would be an ambulance that would do this. And so it's a whole plan. And I mean, I'm just learning this myself as I'm new to the position. But what I have been told is that an ambulance will essentially board the boat in the morning, come over, get the person, and then get back on it and drive them back. So you can imagine just the staffing and logistics that entails.
So our ambulances are not taking them to the facility. The facility is making an arrangement to come over here.
Yeah, no,
or to come to Hyannis.
Is not to my knowledge. That's, like I said, I'm new and still learning the job. But what I think that would deplete our ambulance staff. I think that would be a challenge. So what I have heard and what I have been told is that an ambulance will come over and take someone to the facility.
Interesting.
Yeah.
As chief of police, are you ever truly off duty?
No, absolutely not. Whether I'm on vacation, I can tell you, I travel a lot. You and I talked a little bit about that. And I have been in so many different places across this world where I have been on the phone managing work and issues at work. It is everywhere that I am.
Obviously, you've had experience doing that, but still, it must be very stressful.
I'm accustomed to it. It's my job, and I'm happy to do it. I love my job. I love serving my community, so I certainly don't mind at all. Like, that is what I'm here for. It is something that I think, someday when I retire, I don't think I'll miss that part of it, when I can leave my phone in my hotel room and not have to carry it around all the time. And actually, my wife takes pictures of me whenever we're on vacation and I'm on the phone with work or in a Zoom at work, right? Because she's just like, that's just the nature of it. But I don't mind it at all.
How much time was there between your last day in Northampton and your first day here?
0.
0? Really?
Yes, 0.
You gave yourself no break at all?
Well, yes and no. I worked right up until I took 2 weeks of vacation at the tail end of my former job. So I was able to leave that job, my last official day there, in mid-December. And then we came out here. We had about 2 weeks to settle in. But my actual last working day in Northampton, I worked, right up until I started here.
So during those 2 weeks, you weren't getting any phone calls from...
No, and we had kind of worked that out with the fantastic guy that was, stepping into my shoes there. So,
well, what I'm getting at is during those 2 weeks,
yep.
Did you feel different? Were you aware, I can't get a phone call now for 2 weeks, and this is the first time in who knows how many years that's been the case.
I actually do. It's funny you say that. I actually do kind of remember like going to bed at night, and I think I actually may have even shut my phone off, which I don't do. I sleep with my phone is on all the time. It goes off.
In fact, it could go off at any moment while we're sitting here.
It could. Yes, it absolutely could. So I am definitely on call all the time. But you're right. I think there were some nights in there. Honestly, I was so busy learning my way around Nantucket and unpacking boxes and meeting people. And I was going into work here even before I officially started just to settle in because I really wanted to hit the ground running. So I had, come into the police department and, been setting up my office and all those things. So I think I was feeling stressed, maybe not the on-call stress, but just the new place, wanting to make sure I did the best that I could for the community. I really wanted to know as much as I could before I got here. So that's what I was busy doing during those 2 weeks, is driving around and meeting people and settling in.
So in a way, you didn't have time to sit down and think, the phone can't ring.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I was too focused.
And now I've reminded you of that fact.
You have, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Yep.
This may be an off-the-wall question.
Mm-hmm.
AI and law enforcement on Nantucket.
Yep.
Is that a stupid question?
What's your question about it?
Does AI affect the way you will be doing your job?
I don't think there's any way. I don't know any of us in any field where AI will not be impacting our work. That's just the nature of it. Technology is rapid, right? And we will be seeing it come into all different sorts of aspects of our work. I anticipate.
Even in a small town.
Yes.
So in what sorts of ways would you anticipate this happening? Or do you already see it happening?
Well, I mean, nationally, you can look at, certainly there's big national debates on facial recognition, and you can see it in politics. You see it because you have now, especially I think for this upcoming election, right? All these videos are being generated with people they look like they're one person, maybe someone you and I know, maybe a president, and they're saying things that's not really them, and those circulate. So I just think even about that, how those sorts of things can stir up communities and create discord. Without a doubt, I see a lot of technology impacting our scams is a huge increase in, technology, huge increase in people getting scammed out of money. So I see that. I don't know where else we'll see it. I mean, it's a little bit of everywhere. And it's a matter of people's comfort with how comfortable do you feel having your face scanned to go in and do anything, and is that how we'll be?
Me personally, not very.
I wouldn't think, right? And a lot of people don't feel comfortable with that, but, we're going to see it in banks. Banks will have cameras and you could apply facial recognition technology. If you have a robbery, we'll see it a little bit of everywhere. And so we just have to kind of be mindful of its limitations and the fear around it and how that can impact our work.
I'm sure that there's no such thing as a typical day in your job, even on Nantucket in the wintertime. Mm-hmm. But can you give us an idea of what hours do you work normally? Do you show up at your office at the same time every day, or does that vary?
It varies a little bit, but roughly around 8, and I work till 4:30 or 5, roughly. But, if we have a select board meeting or any other meetings that I'm going to, it can be later. So, generally, I haven't had a summer here yet, but I would say in my career as police chief, I generally worked 60 hours a week, some at home doing emails and on the phone. I mean, it's hard, but you're on call all the time. So even when I'm away, I keep up with my email every day and do all those sorts of things and make phone calls, and, things need to be tended to. Communities have expectations that if something goes on, that their police administrators are available and responsive, and if there's a community issue that comes up that needs a quick response, I'd better be there to give that response, or at least be available to give it. Because if you let things percolate in a community, that's not good at all. Rumors, that's not good. So I've definitely been traveling when I've had to deal with things that have come up that have been really big public issues that I've needed to deal with. So yes, I would say around 60 hours a week, about.
That's a lot of hours for any kind of a job, but especially this
Yeah.
kind of a job. It sounds like an awful lot of hours.
Well, I have to tell you, from what I'm learning here is that I don't think I know anyone that works less than that number of hours. Certainly all of our staff work a lot of hours, whether it's at the department or in second jobs. People are busy here. You know, there's a lot to do, and sometimes not a lot of people to do it.
Well, when I had my store many years ago, I would be working 60 plus hours from June to September, but I at least had September to look forward to when it would drop a bit. But,
Right, right.
But that was another time. I gave it up almost 20 years ago. But that's for any kind of a job, as they say, that's a lot of time.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot of time.
And as a taxpayer and a citizen, we appreciate your doing it.
I'm happy to do it. I love it. I love the work. I really do.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that you do. I'm sure the rest of the town will be glad to hear this when they see this.
Yep, I love it.
Chief Jody Kasper, thank you very much for doing this.
Yeah.
I appreciate your taking the time, and I'm delighted you didn't get a phone call during this interview.
Me too. Thank you so much. It was nice to sit with you.
Good, me too. For Nantucket Community Television on Profiles, I'm Charlie Walters. Thanks for tuning in. Please tune in again.